Welcome to another Bright Spark podcast by Ignys, where we interview really interesting people. Today's guest, it's Jason. What I'm really interested in is what makes you tick as an engineer. So could you talk to me a little bit about your sort of childhood, school? Was engineering something you always wanted to get into? What was the initial path?
Yeah, I think I've always been an engineer at heart. As a child, I always took apart all my toys, whether they were working or broken.
Yep.
If they were broken, I tried to fix them. I think when I was younger, I mostly failed.
Right.
I ended up with things in bits. I give them to my dad, and then Dad would have to try and fix them, and sometimes surreptitiously just go and buy a new one. A lot of the time, I wanted the toys that were kind of the assembly toys, or I had my Meccano, my Lego, and things like that. But as I went on, I did DT at school, design technology, systems and controls. So we did basic electronics. We were allowed to make our own printed circuit boards, which in hindsight was really dangerous.
One with the acid bath.
You've got an acid bath, and you've got an alkaline bath for the developer. You're heating both materials. You've got the bandsaw for the FR4. You've got all these chemicals. You've got all this stuff going on. You're using very bright UV light sources for exposure. Really, really dangerous. But because I think I went to a bit of a laissez-faire school, they just let us have at it. And so I used to make my own kind of hobby electronics, make my own PCBs. They weren't super advanced.
No.
I didn't know what I was doing in like the modern context, but I was good enough to wire up a circuit and kind of make little microcontroller boards and stuff. This is also, not that I'm old, but this is from like the PIC days. So Arduinos didn't exist. The most advanced language I learned was PIC Basic. There was a company called Pickaxe that made in-circuit programmable PICs, and so they were great. Great for being a hobbyist. So I really enjoyed that side of things, design technology, making my own things. But I didn't actually want to be an engineer. I was originally going to be a barrister.
That was the dream. The barrister was the...
Well, in hindsight, it wasn't so much that it was a dream.
Right.
It was, I think, received wisdom. Like my dad was always like, law, go into law, very good profession. My sister was going to be a doctor. I was going to be a lawyer.
Right.
These are classic
family
kind of
tropes.
Family-led career progression. This will be good. It will set you up for life. Good, respectable profession. I think also, certainly from Dad's perspective, I would have been a good barrister because I've got the good argumentative style, and I can carry myself in a conversation. But when it came to selecting my A-levels, I'd picked to do maths, physics, design technology, and an AS level in German. And the chief master of the school called me into his office to say, I appreciate that the universities just require 3 A's for law. They don't actually specify which subjects it needs to be, but you can't do these subjects. Right. You need to do politics, philosophy, English language, something like that.
Yeah.
And I sat in his office and I had a weird little moment of, no, I want to do these subjects. I want to carry on doing mathsy things and physicsy things for the rest of my life. And I don't want to stop doing DT. It's great. It's so much fun. And so I kind of sat and I had a little moment in the office. And I just turned around to him and said, well, no, I'm applying to the universities I'm applying to. I've picked the subjects I've picked. Kind of have it. What choice does he have in what A-levels I've chosen?
It's almost like a movie moment. You can see the light sort of coming in.
And it was later on reflection based on that I was like, this means when I do go and be a barrister, I am going to have to drop all this stuff. And I'm not going to get to do the things. So I would like to be an engineer of some description. And I had no idea how to go about that or what to do. I spoke to my DT teacher at the time, Mr. Howard, and spoke to him about where I should apply, what's good. And he pointed out that engineering is a very broad church. If you apply to Cambridge, they just do flat engineering, and then you specialise later. If you want to go into a specialism, if you want to do aerospace, there's only select universities that you can go to that will do that. Or if you want to do, chemical engineering, maybe you need chemistry, which I didn't have. And so I needed to choose. What I liked was electronics. At the time, I wanted to go into something really high tech, really interesting. I had a little bit of an interest in model aircraft, and I thought I could go into kind of avionics and control systems. and applied to do aerospace design or aeronautical engineering, depending on which university called it, what they call it. And I was accepted to Loughborough for aeronautical engineering. And their aero school had a really nice program where in the first year you did a variety of modules with mechanical design, electrotechnology, they called it, for electronics, technical drawing, aerodynamics, materials, really nice kind of broad program. But then my plan was to then specialize in the later years and do more of the electronics and more of the mechatronics stuff. But then the course program sort of changed a bit and we weren't able to do the out-of-department modules that I would have liked to have done. Okay. So I stopped and went, I am just going to do the full electronics course. Yeah. And so I did a new first year all over again and joined the electronics program at Loughborough as part of their electrical engineering department. That turned out to be a brilliant idea because that course was just vastly more electronics based, obviously. I was able to specialize in that as well. They have a few like paths. You can go more computer sciencey or more embedded. I picked a path that used FPGA and communications devices. So I've got lots of digital comms, microwave comms, as well as configurable logic, really interesting programmable things. So I took that route through university. Came out, I did the MEng program, so I'm a Master of Engineering.
Master of Engineering.
Master of the Universe, but it's much, much smaller than the universe. Master of the Electrons. During my final year, I worked on a quadrotor aircraft that was built around as like a Linux-based single-board computer. I was building all the electronics to go on top of that to do, the avionicsy bits, accelerometers and gyros and little comms module. And that was great. It was very low tech, but when I went to my grad job and all of a sudden I've got all this exposure to this amazing computational power, but also really fine pitch, really high quality, high detail work and very, very expensive parts. I then tried to pick up my hobby projects again.
Couldn't go back.
And I couldn't go back because I can put down a PIC or I can buy an Arduino, but it's so underpowered by comparison, or the things I've done at work have shown me what could be possible, what I could be doing. I wanted to be building an interesting radio system with a custom radio to go on it. And I couldn't afford either the technology itself. I can't go and buy a $3,500 FPGA and stick it down as much as I would want to. And also the engineering processes, a 16-layer PCB is beyond me. I was quite happy as a hobbyist making, a 4-layer board. I could probably sit there and make a stack up for a much thicker board, but I haven't learnt that. I've not got that as an actual skill, and it's something I'd want proper training for before I did, because the net list becomes so complex that a small mistake and you've ruined your now $4,000 board. So my work as my work as a professional, or my exposure to the professional equipment, stopped me being able to be a hobbyist from a want perspective. It was really quite strange.
That's really interesting. Just to loop back to school, so both you and I went to private school, private educated, so I think we had a sort of similar experience there, because I also had interesting choices in A-levels, and to me it sounds like you, I don't want to say broke the mold, but you thought upstream to sort of follow the career that you did. Do you think your career now would have benefited from a more sort of practical background in a different situation, or do you think the education that you got sort of led you to where you are? Would you ever think about those sort of two things?
I think primarily the reason I am where I am is because I want to do practical things. And so whenever the opportunities arisen to build something rather than to do an analysis, I've wanted to get stuck in and make the thing. I always wanted to do the practical things. Even at Loughborough, where there was a reasonable amount of practical work in terms of labs, I always thought there wasn't as much practical work as I would have liked. Again, that's a practicality. In a university setting, you can't do everything with real equipment, and the time constraints and resourcing constraints mean a lot of it's got to be paper based, and you've got to fit a lot into a degree without running labs all the time. So I think the right student will pick their own path through the practical things and come out with a practical bent. The more academic students often did very well in their degree but lacked the practical side. So I don't think the route through education really is the key to it. I think if there's part of the education that matters, it's the individual stuff. It's the fact that my teachers at school, Mr. Walker and Mr. Howard, who very much saw that I really enjoyed it and fostered what I wanted to do, and gave me the permission to make my own printed circuit boards after hours.
Using tubs of acid.
Using tubs of acid, yeah, exactly.
We had an alkaline one there as well, so surely they balance each other out.
At one point, someone left one of the acid baths on late at night, and one boiled over, and there was an acid explosion in the DT lab.
Fantastic.
So yeah, we came into school one morning and there were fire engines.
Do we know which boy left the acid bath on?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think it was ever quite worked out.
No.
But my portfolio for my A-level DT smelled spicy for the rest of the year, and they had to throw a lot of stuff away because a cloud of acid vapour had engulfed the room, which was not fun.
No. So would an apprenticeship route, learn on the job, have made a difference?
I feel like certainly my graduate job was a lot of learning on the job. The alternative would have been to not go to university and go straight into a career as a technician, junior engineer type post.
Which is a common route.
Which is a very common route, but the specific job I picked up where I needed to do a certain amount of radio technology, bits of signal processing, and was working in FPGA design is something that I had not been exposed to at all before university. And so I don't think I would have had access to that technology as a technical student or as an apprentice, particularly when I was 18, 19. For me, I think the university education is an exercise in learning how to learn, and they teach you how to research and how to find the information. But from a practical sense, the first maybe 3 months of my graduate job taught me more practical knowledge than I think my degree did. But I don't think I would have been able to learn it without the degree. So I can't say, in the interest of good science, I've only taken one path. I can't give you a clean answer, but I think I would have been okay in an apprenticeship. I think if it was good, it would have been good because of the mentors. And similarly, my grad job, I had some great mentors. So I think if the people are good and they give you the tutelage that you need and the support that you need in the areas that you're needing to learn, then I think anyone can succeed that way.
So here at Ignys, you're one of our senior engineers. You don't directly line manage any of the engineers. I know you've done that in the past, in previous places. A couple of questions I want to ask is your own workload. So when you're just an engineer, you're a manager of engineers, you still have your own engineering or problems to solve. So how do you sort of balance that? But as well as that, you've also got the pressure from sort of director levels who need results and projects and that kind of stuff. But then you've got the pull of your own team as well. I always think of it as like a double, like you're being squished in the middle. It's like pressure from above, but your team have got their own needs. They've got their own wants. Yeah,
it's a difficult balance. It's a balance that I've not always got right. Certainly in my old job, I was a senior engineer for a while, and I was doing a lot of the mentoring and help, and I'd gained oversight of a number of systems sort of by accident or by stealth. We had an overseas IT team, and I did all the IT in the UK that needed a pair of hands, not as an official role, but just as a message on Teams. The server's down, can you log in and sort that out for us? And image up this new laptop. But you end up with extra obligations, and some of the things aren't really an authority. They're just a job you need to do, but things you're not in charge of. Similarly, looking after project plans. You know, I was never a project manager, but as you become more senior, you become more responsible for the timescales, and particularly when the timescales get missed. And I managed to run that balance okay when I was running my own workload, because if an engineer needed help and I was way behind on my own things, it was acceptable for me to say, I'm really sorry, I'd like to help, but I need to get this release out or do the thing, you know. Particularly if I'm sat trying to debug something in the thermal chamber and I'm a bit spoopy in the brain, you know.
Of course.
Maybe it's a good idea to actually stop and go and help someone, but then I'll end up more behind. And so that was a balance I think I could manage when I had just my own workload. And then as part of, I guess, just general time, you know, my old manager retired, and he was the engineering director, and so two of us got sort of promoted. My one colleague became in charge of the hardware, and I became the software, firmware, and test team lead. So this big umbrella, you know. I was
broad church.
Yeah, I was officially a firmware engineer because I was writing all the FPGA code. My team members were software engineers writing all the sort of embedded Linux and further embedded, you know, DSP code. And we had a test engineer who was responsible for our factory test and validation, continuous integration system and all of that. And all of a sudden I then became the sort of department head in charge of all those things, but also sitting alongside everyone as another engineer. And my engineering workload didn't go down to, you know, compensate for the additional overhead of having to manage a team.
Your obligation to help now.
The obligation then became part of my job description. It then became an interesting problem of, yes, you know, this engineer has a problem. They have turned to their line manager for support. Yes, their line manager has got work to do. Unfortunately, everyone else's problems come first. And for me, I think I am a bad manager. A number of people have said they think I'm a good manager for the people I'm managing because I look after them and I shield them from the problems on high. I try to make sure that everyone has their needs addressed and they're unblocked. I will attempt to fight for, you know, fair pay and things like this. But where I didn't have the power to actually make those things happen, all I did was really take on lots of extra stress for myself. And so I ended up a stressy little ball of mess, working far, far too many hours to try and keep up with everything I was doing. And I ended up having a little bit of a nervous breakdown over some nonsense with an Excel spreadsheet. In that way, you know, tiny little things make us go mad.
Absolutely.
I was sat at home. It was after COVID had happened, and so we'd been running like a remote office. But because I lived closest to the office, I was administrating all the equipment in the office.
Another job.
Yes, another job. Yeah. I'd have people ring me up and say, "Oh, this system's down. Can you go fix it?" And I'd drop everything, jump in the car, go fix the thing, wash your hands, come home.
Did you ask for? I mean, could you ask for any help at this point? Or was it more of a case of couldn't see the wood for the trees?
I don't think I wanted help at that point. I think at that point everything felt sort of okay. I didn't realise quite how stressed I was, and then it was some months into, you know, maybe a year into sort of COVID-y things. It all sort of came to a head where I think we'd been working on a project. The timescales were tight as always. A number of things had happened to slip the project. I'd been announcing my deadlines, you know, what my forecast of when I thought we'd be ready, and I was constantly told that it wasn't good enough. You know, needs to be sooner. And I found that very difficult because I was confident in my own deadlines. Every time I tried to reassess time, I'd come with the same numbers. But I was still trying to work to the thing that I'd been asked for, to the aspiration I'd been given. And that basically meant trying to work as fast as possible, which I think is slower. You know, if you try and go too fast, you end up making mistakes.
Of course.
So yeah, I ended up as a stressy little ball. I was sat in my spinny chair at home crying, and my other half said, you know, let's go for a walk. I think you need to be signed off with stress. And I've never been signed off with stress. I barely even have sick days. Not, I'm usually not sick. It's great.
Yeah.
And I found myself sat there thinking, if I get signed off with stress when I come back, I have to deal with all the mess that's been caused by the fact that I haven't been there for 6 weeks. And
which is a symptom.
Well, I caught myself in that reasoning, thinking, if that's the case, I should just leave. And so, it had become an untenable position for me, and a very unhealthy one.
Yeah. Very brave to decide that.
Well, what I did was I handed in my notice with nowhere to go, partly because I'm very fortunate, and I've got savings. I had the ability to take a couple of months off without really worrying too much about the mortgage for maybe 2 months, and so I made a commitment that it was early September when I was going to finish. I made a commitment that for the entire month of October I wasn't even going to look for a job.
Good on you.
And so I spent a bit of time, got my old helicopter back out, although with a new FPGA-based dev card. That's because now all that stuff's become the hobbyist stuff.
Yeah, of course.
And so all the technology that I lusted over in 2005, that was state of the art, thousands and thousands of pounds. I've now got a £100 board at home. Yeah. It's got all that stuff on it, and the tools are still terrible. Right. The tools are a lot better. Yeah. They're still terrible. They're like 200 gigabytes. It's ridiculous. But everything is much better supported, and I all of a sudden had fun again, and I went back to being a hobbyist for a good 6 weeks.
Refound the passion.
Yeah, and just playing around with it, really enjoying it. And then we got to the 1st of November, and I opened a LinkedIn because I don't see the point. I hadn't had a LinkedIn until that point, and I was beset with recruiters. I think I must have taken a very regular engineering approach of I wrote down all my requirements as a document. That I sent them alongside my CV, and it had things like, I don't want to travel more than half an hour from home. Fantastic. This is where I live. And so some of them would send me things. They'd be like, "Oh, here's a job in Cheshire," and I go, "How far is Cheshire?" And it's more than half an hour. Like, no. Strange that.
I love that requirements document for job hunting.
Well, yeah, because
why not?
Why should I have to sift through things which are against an obvious list when I can hand that list to the recruiter and say, if it doesn't meet all the things on this list, don't send it to me. I did the same when I bought a house. And sent that to the estate agents. Similarly, they kept sending me things that weren't on the list.
You do that in other areas of life, don't you? This is the requirement, so therefore...
Exactly. So I think, the requirement side of things fits quite well with the engineering job. But yes, I spoke to a few different companies. I actually had an offer on the same day as I got my offer from Ignys. Where I'd been to see like a defence contractor doing very interesting looking radar based FPGA things for the noses of Eurofighters. And the other thing that I think milled around in my brain was that I'd come for my interview at Ignys, and one of the things I'd found really interesting was that Stephen, who interviewed me, had said one of Ignys's core values is that we don't make things that hurt people. We'll actively turn down projects that are, for weapons or for, weapons adjacent things. And I mean, since I've been here, I've seen that we genuinely do, it's not just a value, it's a thing that we do. I've, been involved in the decision to turn down paid work, good paying work. And that was really nice. And it just stood out to me as something, here's a company that's not just a mindless shareholder stock profit driven thing. They actually have some values and they're willing to stand by them. And obviously at the time, how willing they were to stand by them, I didn't know.
No. But it was a differentiator.
It was a differentiator. And this other job is making weapons. And had a long chat with my partner about the concept of making things that hurt people, and became more comfortable with the general rule of, I don't want to make things that hurt people. So I then had the offer. I had my offer from Ignys and I had my offer from this other company, and I had the recruiter ringing me up trying to offer me more and more money.
Yeah.
And he just seemed perplexed
Yeah.
that I just said, no, I'm all right, thanks. I'm going to go and take this other one. Yeah, and that was November a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and here we are on the Bright Sparks podcast.
And here we are on Ignys' own podcast.
Fantastic. Progression is something that's very sort of natural. People go from engineer to maybe a supervisor role to a manager, director, up. You seem someone who's very happy to be at the coalface. Is that where you're sort of naturally happy? Is that?
Yeah, I like to help. I like to do. I think if I had a purely oversight position, I would end up interfering and trying to micromanage because I want to be doing. I certainly found that when I was a mixture of a manager and an engineer, I didn't want to do the managing. I don't have the heart to do people's salary appraisals and things because obviously, funds are what they are. And if I have to tell someone that they can't have a pay rise because we've not got the money, even though they've done a really good job, I find that hard. And so I don't want to do those things because I don't enjoy them. The bit of my job I really enjoy is working with technology, working with problems and solving problems. And I enjoy my mentorship. I really enjoy watching other people learn. And so what I want for my long term is a mixture of the two. I want to always have a technical job on hand where I'm working on developing something or building something or solving a problem. But at the same time, I want to be available as a resource to the office to help out with hopefully what is a decent amount of knowledge from the past about weird and wonderful bits of, the electronics sphere.
You're a maker. Even as a kid, you were taking things apart, trying to make them work. Hobbyist engineer, senior engineer, sort of, mentoring now. So your brain must be always problem solving and thinking about things. Is it hard to leave work, go home and not think about a bit of code or how you can solve a certain problem? Yeah,
I split my time kind of weirdly. In my free time, I do archery as a hobby, and particularly in the summer, practice sessions are in the afternoon, when we've got the sunshine. And so I might leave work at 3, go shoot for a few hours and then finish up my hours at home. And so when I've got a problem I need to solve, that can be a really nice break. And you're right, I can't turn it off. I'll leave work, I'll be in the car, I'll be driving in the morning, I'll be thinking about the problem I've got at hand and how to fix it. But I think what I've learned over time is not to worry about trying to turn it off, but trying to let the bits of background task in my brain solve problems for me. It's not about whether it's difficult to turn off. It's about whether you can take the fact that you're always on and use it to your advantage and tailor it to how your world works.
And that doesn't sound like a problem for you, because a lot of people, there's no right or wrong answer here, but a lot of people will clock in at 8, finish at 4 or whatever time that is, and they'll just sort of switch off. Works in a box, but my life is outside of that. And I think that kind of potentially defines a job as maybe a vocation or a calling. Without sounding too pretentious about it.
It does sound quite pretentious.
It does sound quite pretentious, but you are the master engineer of electrons.
Yeah, and I think there has to be something said for always thinking about what you do in your spare time. But at the same time, there's very much a place for turning off. I envy those who can walk out of work and not worry about it until they come back in. I wonder if that would be nice, but I've never experienced it, so I can't say what it's like. When things are not going well, it's horrible because you're trying to hack away at some insoluble problem in your mind, which you can't solve in your mind because you have a physical problem on a circuit that you need to test something or change something. No amount of thinking about it is going to help.
No, it's almost like a pollutant at that point, isn't it?
Yes, it's just spinning around and it's very difficult to get rid of. For that sort of thing, you need your mechanisms to get your brain into a different space. You go for a run, you put the loud music in your ears and you just kind of drown it out. I think on balance, it's a benefit. but that's not to say it doesn't have its downsides.
Yeah. As an engineer, you problem solve all the time. Are you ever truly happy with a solution?
There are some solutions which are wonderful. I think my philosophy has always been make it work, make it fast, make it elegant. There's a real place for just making it work and getting on with your life. And there are, some things you'll write a little script or something, it does a job and it does that job very well and you just leave it alone. And there are other things that you sit and polish. I think there have been particularly optimization jobs where you're trying to make something smaller. So like in the context of an FPGA, you want to use less and less of the chip to do a job or get it done faster. And there are some things I've built in the past where I've looked at it and thought, I don't think this can be better. This is done. And that's wonderful. That's very rare. It's very rare to actually get to a point where you think something can't be improved upon. But in engineering, what we actually need is a good definition of done. Quite often, the customer will have a requirement, and the requirement is always vaguer than the implementation. We need some definition to say it's acceptable when we get here, and we can stop. It doesn't mean that it's finished in terms of it being the best it will ever be or it being optimal. It needs to be good enough, because once it's met all of the requirements, we are done. That doesn't mean to say we couldn't come back and make it better.
No.
I think...
Which must gnaw a little bit.
I think it would gnaw if we didn't then go and work on something else.
Okay.
I think the fact that we're constantly moving from job to job or product to product, interesting technology to, other weird and wonderful things, means that the urge to constantly improve things is satiated by the new things that come in and the things that turn up as a basket case and need a lot of work to make them actually work at all.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, you start not so much cutting your losses, but realizing where the efficiency of your time is spent. I could spend another 40 hours making this 1% faster, or I could spend an hour making this other thing twice as fast.
Yeah.
There is a sanity in not chasing after the last little bit.